wonder if there's any other ways I can use acetate on my cards. Hey everybody, it's Christina from Creations with Christina. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're having a fantastic day. Today we are going to be playing with acetate. I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques that you can use with acetate so you can add to your card designs. But we are going to have some fun playing with other products. I love making tutorial videos for you, so if you have anything that you would love to see a tutorial on, a technique, a product, anything like that, leave that in the comments of any of my videos. I will make a list and I will start producing more of those videos for you. If you're new to my channel, be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell so you can be notified when I post new videos, and everybody, don't forget to give today's video a thumbs up. So let's hop into today's video. Here are the supplies we're going to need for making our acetate cards. You can use, some of these you can do with just plain old sheets of acetate. If you have leftovers from packaging or anything like that, you can use that. I'm going to be doing some projects that are they're going to require some heat. So I have two different types here. I have scrapbook.com. They have acetate sheets that are slightly larger than an A2 size card. So they're bigger than 4 1/4 and 5 1/2. Then I also have this one by Graphics Arts, and it is Duralar, and it is also heat resistant. It's 9 by 12 sheets. I have had this particular book for a very long time. I used it for some stamp backings that I needed because it's also acid free, and I didn't want to worry about my anything that I put with my stamps making them yellow or deteriorating them. This was a long time ago, and I have used a number of sheets in here. Each sheet has a piece of tissue paper protected between them, so they are perfect for doing this kind of project. They're not scratched up or anything like that, and I love these. And I've used these on many different projects, not just for my little project that I did when I was trying to change out the way I store stamps, and I haven't used this for that kind of thing in a very long time, but I thought I would show you ways that you can use this if you happen to have this. I do know you can get it at Hobby Lobby, or at least you used to be able to get it at Hobby Lobby, and I know you can buy it on Amazon as well. And I apologize, you are going to see a glare a lot today because of the acetate, and you're probably looking at all my filming equipment up on the ceiling, so please just ignore that and we'll focus on our techniques. My first technique is, of course, using embossing folders. I just have an embossing folder here. I have my piece of acetate on the inside. I know you can't see it, but trust me, it is there. And we are going to run this through our machine. We're just going to set that in there so you can kind of see the outline of the acetate right there. And I'm using my Platinum 6 embossing machine, or die cutting machine, which I strictly just use for embossing. And I am going to be using the plate system, or the setup of the plates that it recommends. So that's the A plate, B plate, and C plate. And I am just going to run this right through my machine. And what we end up with is this really cool piece of acetate that is embossed with that embossing folder. Now, I wouldn't recommend a 3D embossing folder for this because it does wrinkle it up quite a bit. Let me just grab a piece of cardstock here so you can see this a little bit better. There you go. You can see that pattern much better. So that makes for a really fun background. And a lot of these things that I'm doing, you can combine with all of these different techniques. So this one I said was the embossing folder, and I'm going to show you another way that we can use our acetate. One of the first ways I wanted to show you is stamping. So you definitely have to use something that is going to be a more permanent ink, something like StazOn. I have a black StazOn and a white StazOn. I'm going to use my white StazOn. Now, if you have a white StazOn and you purchased it, usually it comes with a refill for the ink. I did go ahead and ink this up already because it does dry out pretty quickly. So that is all ready to go. And I'm going to grab a background stamp, and I am going to stamp this onto my piece of acetate. Just going to make sure that everything's lined up the way I want it to be. Making sure that covers the piece of acetate. And my acetate actually stayed in place, but I think it's because there's some static. But just to play it safe, I'm going to take a little piece of tape and just hold that in place. So I'm going to take my white StazOn ink. StazOn ink comes with these little covers on them. Hold on to those because they help keep your stamp a little wetter longer. It keeps the ink from drying up. So I am going to go ahead and stamp this out. Now I've already put ink on this, and I inked it not too long ago. It was maybe about 2 hours ago, and it's already dried up. So we're just gonna go ahead and add the ink to this now. This just dries up really quick. This comes with a little spatula so you can kind of spread your ink into your foam of your stamp. And we are going to now ink this up, and we'll get a better coverage. So just like we would do any background stamp onto cardstock, we just got to make sure that we're using a permanent ink, something that will dry and not rub off. So that's where the StazOn ink comes in handy. And you definitely want to make sure you clean your stamp pretty quickly because it dries pretty quick. So we're just going to use our little rubbing tool here, and we're just going to make sure that's stamped down really well. And there we go. That is so gorgeous. I love that. Let me just grab my tweezers, try to pick that up. Okay. And look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? And then it's just a really fun way to add and use acetate for making a background. So I got this all nice and cleaned up. I did go ahead and clean my stamp because it's the white ink. It's not going to come off completely, but at least it's clean. I did get it onto my Misty, but all I did was just took some alcohol spray, sprayed it on there, and that cleaned off really easily. So another thing that we could do with a piece of acetate is to stamp some sentiments. So I'm just going to take that piece of acetate, again, just tape it right down to the bottom, and I am going to float a sentiment. So we're just going to put that right in the center. This is just a Tim Holtz stamp. And again, I am going to stamp this out using some StazOn ink. I don't know how well my black StazOn ink is, so we're just going to try it. If it doesn't work, I'll stamp it out in the white. But it looks like it's doing pretty good. I love the smell of StazOn ink. I don't know if anybody else does, if I'm just the only one who likes it. But we're just going to stamp that onto the piece of acetate. And I'm going to stamp this one more time just to see if I can get this a little bit darker. So there we have our sentiment stamped onto our piece of acetate. And what you could do with this, and I really love this idea, is to take it and make sure that your piece of acetate is longer than your card, and you can cut this in a strip and then wrap it around and tape it onto the back of your card. So it looks like this sentiment is just floating on your card front. Love that look. And I also love it in the white with the StazOn ink. So pretty. Again, I just used some stamp cleaner to clean this off. I let it set for a couple seconds and seemed to clean up much easier. I'm just going to grab another piece of acetate and tape that right into my Misty. And for this one, I am going to be playing with my embossing powders. So I'm just going to add some, just like we were doing regular cardstock, going to add some of my embossing anti-static to my piece of acetate. And then I'm going to grab my Versamark ink. I'm going to stamp or ink up my sentiment just like so. And then we will stamp this out. It's very crooked, but I wasn't paying attention. I just put it in there. So we're going to stamp that out, and then I'm going to grab, just needed to grab a piece of cardstock that I could put back behind my piece of acetate, just for something to catch my embossing powder. And you could probably see when this was pulled away, you can see the happy birthday sentiment right there because of the anti-static. So we're just going to go ahead and cover that up. And I will say this is still tricky. Even though we have the anti-static on there, it's going to stick still to places that does not have that anti-static. So I'm going to just take my rag here and just clean up, because I do have some embossing powder stuck in places that it's not supposed to be, and some of it's even on the back. But because of the anti-static powder, it did kind of keep it in its spot that it was supposed to be. However, if you are putting your anti-static, or you're putting your embossing powder on, just make sure that you do anti-static all over the whole piece of acetate, because if you pour it off in a section that doesn't have the anti-static powder, it's going to stick there. So I am going to grab my heat gun, and we're just going to heat set our embossing powder. There you go. So simple. It actually heats up much faster than a piece of cardstock. We're going to let this dry, but because I used a heat resistant, it didn't even warp. Came out perfect. I'm going to let this cool off. I don't want to touch it because I probably will rub my finger on it and it'll peel or just come, like smear off there. So I'm hoping that a piece of white cardstock will make it a little bit easier for you to see this next technique. I am going to, and we've seen shaker cards many times, and I thought a lot of the flat shaker cards are very in, and they sell pockets to do that, but you could do that with just a regular piece of acetate. I'm going to show you how to do that. Now, I cut a piece of my acetate much larger than my piece of cardstock. This is about, I don't know, probably about 1.5 inches larger on each side, and it doesn't really need to be that big, but I just wanted to do it so that you can see the process a little bit easier. So what I'm doing is just cutting off all 4 corners, and I'm not going exactly to the corner. I'm leaving a little bit of a space on each side. I'm going to grab some of my score tape. I love this tape. It's also called like tearaway tape. And we are going to just line that up at the bottom. You don't have to use such a thick piece. Use a thinner piece of this. As a matter of fact, it's sticking to my scissors and everything. So we're just going to put some of this on all 4 sides. What I'm going to do is peel off this tape to expose the sticky sides. And then we will set this upside down so the sticky side is facing up onto our piece of cardstock, and we are going to get that centered within that cardstock the best we can. All right, or the piece of acetate. I'm sorry, I'm going to keep calling this cardstock. It's acetate. So what I'm going to do is actually take my acetate and fold it over on top of the sticky section. I'm going to use my bone folder to kind of hold or fold that crease so it's a little bit better. We're going to fold over this side. And the reason why we kind of cut it at an angle is that we don't have that crazy overlap there. And then we'll do the other side, and then we're going to leave the top part open. And what I'm going to do is take some of my little sequins here. These are little mini flat heart sequins, and we could just put a whole bunch of them inside. I don't want to put too much because I don't think I'll be making a card with this today. However, I will set it aside and possibly use it for a card in the future. But we're just going to close that up, and then we have our little flat sequin shaker that we can use for a card front. And you don't have to go out and buy the pockets that are specially made for this. You could do this with just acetate that you have, and I really love the way that looks. This next one is going to be a messy one, which is also very fun. I am pulling out my alcohol inks, and we have our blending solution. I've got my blower here that we can blow or move our alcohol inks around, and then I also have my heated tool to dry up whatever I work on. So we are going to have a little bit of fun. We're going to grab a blender with a little felt pad on it that if I need to move my alcohol around, I can do that with my little blender. So we're going to start with just maybe doing this orange first and show you what that looks like just with the orange, which is a lot of fun. So we're going to grab our blending solution and we're going to put a couple drops in different spots. I'm not going to go directly too much onto this, but we're then going to take our blender and we are just going to start dabbing. And we can create this fun marble background. Again, you can use these with any of the techniques that we've done so far and create some fun backgrounds with this. We could take this and run it through an embossing folder. You can use this and stamp your sentiment on here, whatever you would like to do. It's a lot of fun. So I'm going to take my heat tool and I'm just going to dry this up a little bit and show you what it looks like. You can even use this to make the front of your flat shaker card as well. So you just have to make it a little larger, do your alcohol inks on there, and then smoosh the alcohol around. I am going to also add some of this blue, so we can do some marbling on here as well, right over it. We're gonna bring in our alcohol blending solution, and that's, whoops, I sprayed that all over the place. We can spray that onto there, and what that does is, you can see it starts reactivating the alcohol that we already have in there in the orange, and we can start blending and adding this color into. So I'm going to use this to kind of fill in some of those spaces that I added the rubbing alcohol to, and then you end up with this fun background. Now, another thing you could do is you can use your blowing tool here, and you can start moving that around. I'm going to add just maybe a drop of my blending solution right there, and then we can take our little tool here and blow that around, so we even get more different techniques or different looks to this as well. I'm heating this up, and my cardstock is actually warping and not the paper, which is fantastic. So we're just going to grab this, and then we have this beautiful marbled background with two colors. You can even go in, if you have any of the mixative, you can add that, do like a white, a little bit of white in here. If you have the gold, oh, that would be stunning with this. And you could do some gold backgrounds. And again, this can be used on the top of a shaker card. You can put your sentiment on here, cut it down, and do a floating sentiment, however you want to use it. But it is so fun to play with your alcohol inks on acetate. And then the last thing I thought I'd show you is just by taking a piece of the acetate. This is cut at 4 1/4 by 11. I'm going to do a score at 5 1/2, and then you can make your own A2 size card bases. Now, this particular acetate is pretty thin, so I won't say it's the sturdiest thing, but you definitely would want to make sure that you've got a lot of cardstock backing on there to get it so it's nice and sturdy. But it does make for a great card base. And this is going to be a top fold card. Just got to make sure you do a nice crease on there. You can even use transparencies if you have any of those, but you could definitely use this to make yourself a card base. And there we go. That is everything. So we have our bonus, which is doing a card base, doing some alcohol, so we can create a alcohol background. We used our embossing folders to create some texture. We used StazOn ink to stamp out our sentiment. We also used embossing powder, and then we also stamped a background with white ink as well. And don't forget, you can stamp in black. You can stamp the background with the Versamark ink and do it in any color of embossing powder. There's so many different ways to use these. And then we also created our little flat shaker card element that we can use for a card as well. I hope you enjoyed today's video and found it helpful, and you learned something new, or you were reminded of techniques that you haven't tried in a long time. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video. Bye!